Okay, we're back, and I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office, North Georgia's only live online morning show. And we were happy to be able to bring Congressman Doug Collins in this morning, and the Congressman answered a lot of questions concerning the American Health Care Act to replace Obamacare. Now it's time. We have been following the 6th Congressional District race special election that will take place on April 18th, and it has 18 candidates in the race, 11 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 2 independents. This morning we have one of the Republican candidates with us, Mr. Keith Grawert. Mr. Grawert, are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Good. Well, glad to have you, sir. Let's start out. Let's give you an opportunity. You're an Air Force veteran. First, thank you for your service. We always do that. And why now? Why now run for Congress? Just give us a little bit of introduction on what your interest is here.
Well, yes, as you mentioned, I've spent about 14 years in the Air Force serving my country. So this is kind of an opportunity in my mind to continue that service to the country. You know, you kind of see what's going on in Washington, and it's kind of a if not me, then who sort of scenario where I see the problems that we have up there. I see the lack of leadership and the lack of commitment to service, and I just felt like, having spent my career serving the country, this was an opportunity to continue that service in another capacity.
Okay, have you held an office before, an elective office before?
No, I have not, and I only recently actually came off of active duty in the military. So I basically took a uniform off and then decided to run for Congress. And it's been pretty quick for me.
And I do have. Now, let me go through what I usually do with our candidates in our interviews. Go through your website and look at some of the policies that you have and give you an opportunity to explain some of your issue policies. Let's go with let's go with healthcare reform. Recently, we just had announced what they're calling the repeal and replace of Obamacare. You have several congressmen that are for it and support it. Several oppose it. You have senators for it. You have senators like Rand Paul oppose it. It's called the American Health Care Act. And the reason I ask you this, and kind of putting you on the spot, if elected, HHS Secretary, which you want to replace there in the 6th District, Tom Price, said yesterday this could have 3 phases. So you could definitely, if elected, be involved in this. Have you had an opportunity to look at what they've presented and what's your version of health care?
Yes, I mean, I have looked at the bill, not as in-depth as I would have liked to at this point. It's healthcare is obviously a very complex economy out there. As far as where I stand on the American Health Care Act, as it is right now, I think it's the first step. I don't think that's what the eventual bill will look like. Some of the criticisms that it is Obamacare Light or Obamacare 2.0, I think there's definitely some merit to that. But it is a movement in the right direction and a good starting place. But I do not think that's what the final bill will look like.
What would you like if you're representing the 6th District? What would you like the final bill to look like, or some of the major points that you would like to see it achieve in healthcare?
Well, I think that this initial bill, some of the things that it doesn't specifically address yet are really structural reforms to healthcare as a system. I think the 2 things that we need to look at are competition between the providers and choices for the patients. So I don't think that we have kind of cracked the egg on that yet. There's more that can be done in that aspect. I also think that some of the stuff that Rand Paul has put out there about allowing insurance companies to go across state lines, those are other aspects that I think need to be in there, because the bill as it stands now is just an improvement on the Obamacare system as it is, but doesn't really address those systemic problems we have in the healthcare system that drive up our costs higher than anywhere else in the world for care that is probably not commensurate to the amount that we pay per person.
Well, we know this just came out yesterday, and it's just something that obviously is going to be part of the conversation here as this campaign goes on. One of the other things, I want to give you a brief opportunity, something of interest, because the president, if elected, you would be serving in a Congress with a Republican President, Donald Trump. And right after health care would be tax reform. So you have that on your website. What is your version of tax reform? Have you looked at the president's version of what tax reform he wants? Do they parallel, or what do you think?
Yes, I think tax reform is one of the best things we can do for the economy. And once we get the economy going, all these other things become easier to address, whether it's healthcare or supporting the military. I don't think Trump's plan it's basically improving and simplifying the system that we have right now. I believe it's less brackets, simplified deductions. And I'm in favor of that as an initial step to try and fixing the tax system. Eventually, I'd like a very simple flat tax. Maybe get rid of the IRS, but definitely reduce the incentive in government to always use the tax code to kind of play favors to whatever interest is in vogue at the time. So I'm definitely for a vast simplification of the tax code. I don't know that I'm ready to go to a fair tax, although there is some merit to that, maybe down the line. So that's kind of where I stand on that. But I think tax reform is one of the best things we can do for the economy and the American people right now.
So do you think, and you touched on this, so would you support getting rid of the IRS?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. Let's look at immigration. Currently, the president has discussed how he wants to go through methodically and change and fix immigration. What have you seen in what he wants to promote different from what you have in mind, or what's your version of how we fix immigration in this country?
So I'm fairly supportive of the president's plans, specifically improving our vetting procedures. I think that is a move in the right direction, and not something I think that people can fault him for. Clearly, there's some issues in the rest of the world, and we need to know who we're bringing in. Related to that, the whole thing with immigration is you can't have an honest debate about immigration and what you're going to do with people that are in this country illegally until you secure the border. And we have not done that for decades. We've talked about it. So it all hinges on first securing the border. So I'm a proponent of aggressively working to secure the border physically, and then in terms of the vetting procedures for those that we do let into this country.
Well, when we say let in, let me ask you, there's 12 million, 11 million, the number keeps coming up in different number, but somewhere in that area that are here. Is, I wouldn't say pathway to citizenship, I'm not asking that, but is there a pathway for them to stay, or do you like the president's phased plan on immigration of focus on criminals, as his words, the bad dudes, and move them out first, or what? How do you see that? The ones that are here.
Yeah, absolutely. The quote bad dudes, I'm totally supportive of removing those individuals from the country. But I think it all goes back to it doesn't really matter what you're going to do until you secure the border, because this problem will just keep perpetuating itself. But specific to the ones that are here, I'm not necessarily in favor of a path to citizenship. We will have to deal with that. We'll have to have a discussion as a country once we secure the border. But in the meantime, we should be very aggressive in removing those individuals that are causing harm in our communities.
What about I want to go another direction, because I'm trying to get as much in as we can in 30 minutes. Not going back a little bit to healthcare. You're on your right to life. You're pro-life. And will fight to protect the unborn. I also oppose using federal funds to pay for abortions. So is that a part of the new health care plan, that you can support defunding Planned Parenthood? Would you, the new plan, I'm not for sure how exactly it's written, but do you agree with defunding Planned Parenthood through this new plan?
Yes, I do believe that is part of the new plan, and I would support that. I mean, I believe Trump yesterday even offered Planned Parenthood continued funding if they would stop carrying out abortions, and they turned that down. The problem with Planned Parenthood is, as people have talked about, the money, one, is fungible, and two, the organization has become overly political. So there are other options for women to get the health care needs that Planned Parenthood provides, beyond those abortions. So I just can't see supporting them as they currently operate. So I would support that aspect of the new health care bill.
I think even the president has said that he would, I think it's any organization, I think any organization is the way it is written, that accepts federal funding cannot perform abortions. And I think obviously that includes Planned Parenthood. I think he's also said in there that any organization that, for women's health like that doesn't promote abortion, that they'll even look at increasing funding, but the abortion can't be a part of their services. So is that something, you could support that?
And that I think is a logical place to be. I mean, the country's about 50-50 on abortion. The people, who are opposed to it, I mean, it is such a deeply divisive issue that it just does not seem right to use taxpayer dollars to support something that so many people are so against. But, that doesn't mean that we're against women's health care. It's just that we
Right.
don't want to use federal funding for that aspect. But
I
women's health care is very important, and we need to provide those opportunities for women that can't afford them through, their own health care plans.
I think I think statistically you're correct off the top of my head. It could be 50-50 on abortion, but I think that number changes dramatically when you ask if federal funds should be used. Even people that are pro-choice actually say no, not federal funds. So I think that number changes considerably. Here's something that does not get it, and you have it on one of your issues here. It does, to me, it does not get a lot of people talking about. The president talked about opiates, I think I have that correct, coming from Mexico, and some people in Congress just actually laughed about it. To me, you have down as one of your issues substance abuse crisis. You call it a crisis. Share what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and this is kind of a personal issue to me because my wife is an addiction psychiatrist, so she deals with this firsthand. And I mean, to be honest, I did not know the extent of the problem until she sort of started talking to me about it. And it hasn't been a huge issue in Georgia, but it is growing. And basically, a lot of it goes back to the prescription of opiates back in the 80s and 90s. People get started on pain pills, and then they go down this slide to heroin. But you have more people dying of drug overdoses in this country now than car accidents. And, in the past, there was this principle of, heavily criminalizing the use of the opiates. And that has kind of been counterproductive. It's an addiction that needs treatment. What we're doing is not working. You can just look at the statistics. So it's something that I think people need to be educated about, both the extent of the problem and, what the underlying factors that go into that. So it's just something that my wife is very passionate about, that she has brought into my attention, and an opportunity for, both sides to come together, Democrats and Republicans, and be like, this is a crisis that is nonpartisan that we can work to fix. So that's why I put that on there.
I agree with that myself. I think we have I for one did not think we would be at this point in 2017 dealing with a heroin problem in this country, and it definitely is, to me, at crisis level. We got plenty of time, but let's go with two more things. I'm trying to get all of your issues as far as some well-rounded information for the voters, and that's our goal here. Let's go to foreign policy. in your issues that you have on your website concerning foreign policy?
Okay, I mean, my big thing on foreign policy, without getting too specific, is the underlying notion that we are safer as a world when America leads. I think that we have seen when we take a step back, when we engage in empty rhetoric, specifically talking about President Obama and Syria, the world tends to destabilize. That said, there's an importance in also building consensus with our partners. You know, I know Trump has made some comments about NATO. You know, I think NATO is a fantastic organization. I mean, there's improvements that could be made, but those international organizations, they don't operate perfectly, and I've worked with them. You know, I was with NATO for about a year and a half. But it's important to get other players on board. You know, it's easier to engage in foreign policy when you don't act alone, but you build consensus. So those are kind of like the underlying themes of how I view foreign policy.
Well, in the same sense, you said you were with NATO how long?
About a year and a half. I was stationed in Hungary.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but no, so for a year and a half, so you know, a lot of media outlets are making a lot of what the president has said about NATO. He's the kind of guy, he just throws something out. If he's thinking about it, it doesn't mean it's really he's going to do it. He might just throw it out there. So he said he might leave NATO. But what we're finding out is really through Vice President Mike Pence and some of the other comments that are being made is the president just wants all the players to pay their fair share. I think some of the countries are supposed to pay 2%, if I'm just using this off the top of my head, 2% of their defense budget into NATO to be a part.
Correct.
And I think, is that correct, 2% of their defense budget?
Yeah, I think 2% is the goal, and I believe only 5 countries meet that goal.
Right, so I think, you know, the American people, a lot of people, and one being myself, is saying, you know what? We're almost tired of taking care of the world, and these are my words, financially, in so many ways. We don't care to be in NATO, but you got to pay your fair share.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I would agree with you there. And as somebody who worked with NATO, I think there is a lack of shared burden there. So that is something that we need to work on. So I agree with you in that we are carrying an unacceptable portion of that payment. So that's something that we need to work on and get those partners more committed, because I forget who it was, you know, was it Secretary Mattis that said, why should we care more about your children's safety than you do?
Right.
So there are issues there. There are issues there, but I don't want to see us abandon them, but kind
you
of work
see
through
areas,
those and get those partners.
You see areas from firsthand, being in NATO yourself, you see areas where we could definitely work on, and the president is correct that, you know, we have to make some adjustments in NATO to make it effective of what it was created for in the first place.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's plenty of issues too, because you have so many countries. You have integration problems between the forces. I mean, sometimes it's even less efficient to operate as a coalition than it would be for us to operate by ourselves. But there's value in operating as that coalition in terms of international support and things like that. You know, that's just the nature of this interoperability of our military. So there's areas to work on there. There's efficiencies that could be gained. It's going to take a long time. We do need those other nations to step up and start contributing more. But NATO has been a force for good, I believe, for many decades.
Let me get this in before our time runs out, because this is a top issue for a lot of Americans when they go to the poll, is national security, defense, terrorism, what's going on out there, and feeling their representative, their senator, or the president is doing all to protect us in the homeland. So national security and defense, I just want to read your comments here. I am a strong supporter of the military and believe in the motto of peace through strength, having served in the military in the Pacific. You served in the Pacific, Europe, and Middle East. I have firsthand experience working to deter many of the very threats we face abroad, including North Korea, Russia, and ISIS. So we'll end at that right now. A couple days ago, you have firsthand experience through your service of a couple days. Every day we're seeing something on the news where, and actually Rex Tillerson is headed to Japan now, and South Korea and China, because what I feel in the last 8 years was not on the top level of concern, should have been. North Korea keeps lobbing these bombs towards our allies and actually trying to get one to reach our shore. Russia has had free reign for 8 years, my opinion, been able to Crimea, and the list goes on. And ISIS, obviously, we're all discussing ISIS. So what say you with some of these things with national security? Let me give you the floor.
Yeah, well, I think you just summarized what a...
Well, no, that you were, maybe I got carried away. I'm sorry, that you're supposed to do.
This is serious business, and it's hard, and there's a lot going on there. Going back to to go back to NATO, but also on the Pacific side with our partners in Korea and Japan. I'm not a proponent of us being the solution to everything, but I am a proponent of us being involved. I actually served in Korea for a year as well, and the big thing about Korea is, at least with North Korea, I think, is that the North just wants the status quo. I mean, the regime is worried that something's gonna take them down. And the best check against that is for us to maintain a presence and be engaged there. We also need to get China to start participating in that, because they have a lot of influence with North Korea. As far as Russia, I agree. I think we gave them an inch and they took 10 yards, so to speak, both in Crimea and with what they did in Syria. So there's a lot going on.
How supportive of you?
Could be an hour in itself.
Yeah, but let me ask you a question. From a military standpoint, how supportive of you of the new spending the president wants to do in strengthening and renewing our military, so much equipment, and on that same vein, how supportive of you in knowing that Mattis is the National Defense Secretary of National Defense, and also Rex Tillerson out there as Secretary of State? What are some of the things you see there that are positives or maybe even negatives?
I'm pretty excited about both those gentlemen, Mattis and Rex Tillerson, to start out with. As far as the spending specifically, yes, I mean, the military needs some recapitalization. If you look at the age of our aircraft, at our Navy, things like that, there's definitely a need for recapitalization. I am a little weary of just kind of blanket increasing the budget by 10%, because as somebody that was in the military, and especially, just an operator out there, as we said, hacking a mish every day, there is massive waste in the Department of Defense. I think the bureaucracy is too big. There's too many people at the Pentagon. Our acquisitions program is very broken, specifically in the Air Force. When you look at some of the new programs that have been brought online, they're costing billions and billions of dollars more than they should. Politics is getting involved in that. You've got 435 members of the House, 100 senators, all trying to get a piece of these large acquisitions programs. So, in a roundabout way, to answer your question, yes, I believe that there is serious improvements that need to be made in the military with weapons, acquisitions, personnel policies is something else I could talk about that I think we need to improve. But I also see that there's a lot of waste there, and I think that's one of the things that I can bring as a veteran to the Congress, is the ability to kind of hold senior leaders to account for some of the waste that might be going on, because everybody wants to support the military, but we want to do it in a fiscally responsible way.
Okay, I have two things that I want to close with. I've asked every candidate that has interviewed with us. As far as, we're getting ready to, we're talking about health care, we're talking about all these things going on, but we're getting ready to get hit with the debt ceiling again that is expiring, and our debt is spiraling out of control, next to $20 trillion. right on the edge of it. What say you about the national debt? What do we do? And I know we just don't fix it. Is there 435 congressmen? So I know you just can't go up there and fix it. But what say you about this national debt and our debt crisis that we're in this country?
Yes, even in military circles, one of the things that you hear some of the senior leaders talk about is the biggest threat to the nation might not be ISIS, Russia, or North Korea. It might be the national debt, and I think there's some merit to that comment. So it's definitely something that we need to get under control. I'd say there's two ways to do that. There's the easy way and the hard way. The easy way is you grow your economy. And you basically, the ratio of that debt to your GDP starts to go down. But I don't think we can do it that way alone. And then there's the hard way, which is controlling spending. So it's going to take leadership. I think one of the things that you can look at is just the structure of Congress itself. With career politicians, nobody wants to be the guy that cuts spending. This is where I think term limits could come in and help. I think maybe eventually looking at some sort of balanced budget amendment could help, because in 2021, interest on the debt is going to exceed the expenditures we make on the military. So it is a huge problem, and really at its fundamental level, it's going to take leadership, and it's going to take Congress putting the long-term interest of the country ahead of what is politically convenient at the time. So I would really think, doing things like term limits or something like that is going to basically set the conditions such that our people in Washington will finally make the right call.
Considering you said the word term limits, would you commit to imposing term limits on yourself? Have you made that decision, if elected, how long you would serve?
The commitment I would make is that I will vote for term limits, and I would have no problem voting myself out of a job. I somewhat fear a little bit saying right off from day one, hey, I'm only going to stay here for 6 years, because those aren't the rules of the game yet, and I wouldn't want to undermine my ability to get things done. So Even if it was in my mind, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. One last thing before we close. I've asked all the candidates now. Let's drill this down to the 6th Congressional District, there where you live, and the people you would represent in the 6th Congressional District. Is there a specific issue in that district that you would like to sponsor or move forward in Washington, D.C. that you feel you need for the people there in that district?
I'd like to be specific and something doable. So I will give you something instead of listing off a whole bunch of things, and that is tax reform, because I think that helps grow the economy, which helps everybody, and it's an achievable item that people could see immediate impact from. The next time you do your taxes, if that is an easier process, I think that would be an accomplishment, and especially if we can attack the corporate side of that and help spur investment in business here in Georgia and grow the economy.
Mr. Grawert, I appreciate you so much. I want to thank you for being with us. We always tell every candidate before we leave, FetcherNews.com and FYNTV.com. We thank you for your willingness to serve. We also, in your case, we thank you for your service, and we wish you well in this campaign.
Thanks a lot. It was great to be here this morning.
Okay, that was Republican candidate Keith Grawert for the 6th Congressional District. I enjoyed that conversation with the candidate. They are, again, 18. Trust me, this is going to get national recognition. The election is April 18th. They will work the last 3 weeks. This is a national recognized. They want to turn the 6th Congressional District, many do out there, to try to say, hey, the Trump agenda is not being accepted very well by the voters. So this is going to get a lot of interest. We've been interviewing candidates every morning. We have another candidate tomorrow morning from this district. We have one that's not responded to our invite. We're going to actually tell you who they are at the end of our series. We'll be back after these messages. Lonnie, take us a break.